Good afternoon, Jess. Welcome to the latest APM PMO SIG webinar. It's all about today finding your PMO mojo following lockdown. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to do a few introductions first, and then we're going to talk about some of the stats from the industry just to understand a little bit about what PMOs are facing right now, some of the challenges that they're finding, as well as some of the positives of lockdown. We're going to look at some tactics, so how you can make your PMO strong for the future. And we're going to give you some real practical things that you can actually take away and do straight away, which will give you some insight into what you can do for whatever the new future looks like. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Emma-Ruth Arnaz-Pemberton. I'm the chair of the APM PMO Specific Interest Group. I'm a fellow of the APM and also an NLP Master Practitioner. I've recently become accredited as an Axelos P3M3 assessor. I'm very passionate about PMO and maturity, as you can probably tell, and my focus is really around people and collaboration, and that's one of the reasons why I'm delivering this webinar today. Firstly, I wanted to tell you a little bit about PMO SIG and who we are and what we do. We've been around for knocking on about 17-18 years as a specific interest group. We joined the APM some time ago, and we've been involved in lots of different aspects of developing the PMO industry as a whole. So we've been involved in developing the competence framework. So the roles that you see that are PMO specific, we were involved with that. The development of the PMO of the Year award, I'm really proud that we managed to do that. And just last year, we managed to get the PMO as a term in the latest body of knowledge. So if you're not on the 7th edition, get it, because it does have PMO in there for the first time ever. So we are hopefully helping to move our little industry forward. It is a very fast-paced industry, and it's fair to say that we've probably not seen the amount of change that we've seen over the last few months as quickly that has impacted people. So I'm going to start with just a few stats, really, just to give you a little bit of a perspective on what virtual working, which is where most of us have ended up, have actually done to people and PMO. So if we look at people first, we can see that actually 3/4 of people who we speak to would consider changing their work to work in a more flexible environment, as in being able to have the ability to work from home whenever they want to, and the flexibility that comes with that. That's really correlated with the one on the right-hand side, which kind of really relates to that around mental well-being and the work-life balance. Everybody nearly, or 3/4 of people anyway, have say that that's improved for them. It's really made a difference being able to be at home and having that flexibility. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that in the next slide, and some of the positives and negatives that can come from that. And really interestingly, before coronavirus, this stat made me giggle a little bit. So we used to spend about 66 minutes talking about non-work related topics with our colleagues. And now that we're working from home, that's reduced to 9 minutes a day, apparently. So really interesting to see that not only are we getting a better work-life balance, and most people are actually happier having the flexibility of not having to be in the office every single day, but we are actually being more productive at home as well, for the most part. So that all sounds really positive. It sounds great for the people, it sounds great for the organisation, but like I said, there are some challenges that come along with having this flexible world that we're suddenly living in. And so I thought I would explore these with you a little bit. The first one, and I've had quite a few PMOs that have come to me to ask for some help around this, is around delivering governance and assurance remotely. So we're so used to being able to walk down the corridor, knock on someone's door, or have a meeting in the work restaurant or in a meeting room, and we can really like look somebody in the eyes, and that makes a difference when it comes to governance and assurance. Also, it was much easier to have meetings with different sets of people, whereas what we're finding is that although we are all connected, it is still hard for people to psychologically do governance and assurance without having the people in the room and really getting people to make those decisions. So this is a really good time to kind of review, maybe take a pragmatic view on the amount of assurance and governance that we're doing, and kind of maybe pare it back a little bit. Have we been doing too much because it's almost been really easy to get people in a room and do that? The next challenge has been about connectivity. You're all connected virtually. We are connected all of the time across many, many different mediums at the moment. And we really need to balance that with that level of over-connection, not really being able to switch off in many cases, whilst at the same time being disconnected on a human level. And this kind of pairs right back to my particular focus on people and collaboration. And the beauty of being in an office is that we get that human touch, that human experience. And we are all kind of tribal social beings at the very core. And what we're finding is that there are some assumptions that when people are at home, you're at home all the time, so we assume that people are having valuable conversations and they're being enriched in all the conversations that they're having. And we shouldn't assume that. We should assume instead that we still need to ask them how they're doing, what's going on in their world. One of the things that I've been saying to my team is just kind of for 10 minutes, just find out how everybody's doing, because there are people out there who are very extrovert, for example, who are suddenly in a house, maybe on their own, and they are really finding that I'm overly connected on a work level, but on a human level, I'm actually disconnected because I can't go out and see as many people as I would. I'm not out and about traveling with work. I'm not in different people's offices, etc. So it's a really fine balance between that over connection versus the disconnection on a human perspective. Next is the flexibility. It sounds like a great thing. We can, you don't have to wait till the weekend to do your life admin anymore. If you need to nip out, you can do. Chances are that, some of us are not morning people, so we maybe start work a little bit later and we work a little bit later. Other people have a gap in the middle of the day, depending on what's going on in their life. And that's all really great from an individual perspective. But if we think about the PMO and thinking about all the meetings that we're so used to having, is how do we deal with the inconsistency in people's working hours? One of the really interesting things that I've found is for very traditional organizations, they liked to have bums on seats, as they would call it. 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I want to be able to look out of my office and I want to be able to see the people. Now, these organizations and everybody else, we have to kind of trust the fact that people are working. It is quite easy when we get frustrated to think, oh, they're obviously just sitting at home, not doing very much, twiddling their thumbs. So having that flexibility is great. And we need to balance that with trust, but also the inconsistency in working hours. If we need a cross-functional team to join us in a meeting, we need to make sure that those people are available, that we're not impinging on some time that they've put aside for something else that maybe isn't work related. And we were talking about this within my own team around that time management area. And we actually talked about, if you want to focus on a specific item or piece of work, then actually block out focus time in your calendar and kind of encouraging people to, before you press that Teams, oh, I'm just going to call and ask them for 2 minutes, is check the calendar, make sure that we're not actually interrupting something that we should maybe be leaving to it. And certainly one of the rules I always say, if it can wait till Friday, then Friday is the meeting day. So, wait until Friday. We don't have to, because we're being flexible, we feel, oh, I need to finish early or whatever. We need to be mindful and respectful that not everybody's in the same position that we are. The next big challenge is around technology. There was a big assumption made by many organizations that we can just switch everything on and the people will magically get it. They'll magically understand exactly how they need to use this brand new technology. And we are seeing that technology is kind of taking over, both from a work perspective with lots of different mediums, but also on a personal perspective. When we've all been at home, that's how we've been able to communicate with our family and our friends, is to use more technology. So again, from a PMO perspective, we've kind of in many cases made that assumption that just because someone's working from home, they magically know how to use Teams or Zoom or go to a webinar in the case of today. So we need to really be cognizant of the fact that not everybody might be as tech savvy as you are, as we are. So we really need to think about internally and externally, how are we supporting people with technology, because some people are genuinely struggling. And then the last one is around learning. One of the huge things that we've seen throughout the pandemic is the uptake in online learning. So according to Udemy, they had a 200% uptake on people taking their online courses, which is amazing. And it's amazing to see that people are taking the time to take responsibility for their own development and their own learning. However, this is something that we just need to be mindful of, in the sense that what it's creating, and you will see this probably on LinkedIn, is experts. And I'm going to put, you can't see me, but I'm putting experts in kind of quotation marks, because by going on a course, I never believe that that makes anybody an expert in anything. It's experience, and having the war wounds and having done it well and having failed at things that really makes gives us that expertise, that mastery that we're continually moving over or growing with throughout our lives. So we just need to be mindful that the positive of this is that within our PMOs, what we're going to see is an influx of new skills, which used to mean that certain things we wanted to deliver, certain services we wanted to offer our business was not available to us because we didn't have the skills. Whereas now what we're seeing is we have a much more diverse set of skills, which means some things are open to us now. But it's about not just saying, oh, well, you've done that 2-hour course, then you go and own that. We need to make sure that we continually invest in our PMO people, our project managers, our delivery teams, etc., even our sponsors, to make sure that anything new that they thought, that interests me, I'm going to learn about it, that they can actually learn about it. Then all of that kind of lends itself to talking a little bit about job security. We've seen lots of PMOs where the team has been completely disbanded, as an example, and we've also seen lots of projects and programs that have been stopped or placed on hold as organizations need to protect their cash flow, etc., etc. So I've had several people kind of come to me saying, I'm worried about my job security. What if the organization changes direction? What if the PMO that I have right now isn't going to support the business in the future, and I don't know how to adapt? And a little bit about that's what we're going to be talking about, some of the tactics that you can use to really support your organization moving forward, and really give you some ideas on how you can potentially adapt what you do today to help your organizations in the future. So those are kind of some of the challenges. Like I say, the pandemic and the lockdown environment and the virtual working, the change to virtual working has given us some real positives, but it's also brought some new challenges to PMOs that we need to be aware of and that we need to consider in our own environment, in our own context, as to, is this a problem or an opportunity from my reality, my organization? And every PMO is different. So what we're going to do now is we're going to just do one of our first polls of today. And given what we've seen here, so structure, connectivity, flexibility, technology, and learning, what would you say are your biggest challenges right now when you consider these 5 areas, to see what we get? And we can see that structure, really supporting that, is the structure that we had from an organizational governance and an assurance activity perspective, is that is looking at the moment at 55%, looking like that is our biggest challenge at the moment, is really taking maybe that pragmatic view on how do I get people to get more involved in governance from a remote perspective. And also I can see that the second biggest one is connectivity, and that balance between over connection versus disconnection on a human level is really interesting. I know that I really struggled in the beginning of lockdown to try and get myself into a bit of a routine. I'm so used to traveling that actually being at home felt like I was kind of in prison almost. I wasn't going, wasn't going out, wasn't going to the shops. Really struggled to get into that routine and really find that balance between being connected for work and then having to be then disconnected but also connected through technology with my family and friends. So we can see there 57% has kind of landed at structure, 36% connectivity, and then we've got that flexibility, dealing with people's slightly tweaked working hours that might change on a day-to-day basis, and then technology, and then learning. So learning is interesting because what is happening in a lot of organizations is that we don't know that people are doing these courses. They're just doing it in their own when they've got a little bit of downtime. So it will be interesting when we get a little bit more back to normal, whatever that ends up looking like, to really understand how that's going to impact our organizations with people with brand new skills and brand new interests in some cases as well. So thank you for that. That's really, really interesting. You can see, hopefully, we're sharing those poll results. You can see that you're not alone. And that's one of the reasons why we do these webinars and include these polls, so that you can see that although it can sometimes feel a little bit lonely and no one else is going through this, you're not on your own. There are lots of other PMOs. So I do urge people always to kind of reach out to your peers, you know, whether it's through one of our PMO SIG groups or lots of other social media groups that there are available for PMO people. So next we're going to talk about, okay, we now know what the challenges are. So let's talk a little bit about some tactics that we can use to really help us to start to redefine what our PMOs might look like in the future. So the first one for me is do some accounting. So understand your environment, understand what projects do you have, what programs do you have, what's been placed on hold, what do you have in your pipeline, what is new that we've never considered before that we think this is going to come at some point, this is going to come and we're going to have to stand something up. So understanding your environment is really important, and that's very true for a PMO as well as you as a human being, is understanding, take a look back, do some reflective practice around where am I sitting now? What does my operational environment look like? Has my organization changed direction? Is it likely to? What is tricky right now for the organization that maybe wasn't as tricky before? I mentioned technology earlier. That's something that lots of organizations are struggling with, and it's not something they were in any way prepared for. So do some accounting and really start to understand what your environment looks like, what your reality looks and feels like. Next, we want to do some lessons learned. So we love our lessons learned in PMO, but this is a really good time to look at the projects that have finished recently, to also look at any lessons from the pandemic. How did we handle that very, very quick transition to digital virtual working? Is there anything that we need to think about if we onboard new people, if we are implementing new other technology for other things? Is there anything we could do differently, better, or do the same? Not all lessons are negative after all. So this is a great time to just take a step back and really reflect on the lessons that we've learned over the last 5 months in particular, but also around the project delivery, and how we can maybe be a little bit more efficient with the projects that we are going to have to be inevitably standing up quite quickly over the next few months. The next one is to look at your PMO objectives. Like I said, many organizations are changing direction. Many PMOs need to adapt to fit with that. There's lots of organizations who have had to really change the way that they completely do everything. Their whole way of working has had to change. So it's really important that we take this time to really look at our PMO objectives and understand if they are still relevant. Some probably will still be, most probably will still be, but some won't. Some will need tweaking, or we might need some additional objectives in there to kind of make sure that we're supporting our organization in our reality through that project accounting, and also through what we've learned over the last few months. And then natural next step for me is always to then refine the roadmap. So you've probably already got a roadmap for your PMO. I always say kind of look out 18 months to 2 years. I generally don't try to go any further than that because the world changes, as we well know. But yeah, refine the roadmap. Look at some of the continuous improvement activities that you have in your current roadmap. Is that still realistic? Does anything need to be slotted in? Do we need to do things at a different pace? Do we need to bring some things forward just because of the way that we've had to transform very, very quickly? And revise that roadmap and republish it and let people know, you know, based on what we've learned and based on the reality of our organization, this is where we think we need to kind of switch, maybe change direction a little bit, maybe take a slightly longer route to where we wanted to make sure that we are adapting enough to support our organization better. And then lastly is around the community. We've talked a little bit about that over-connection, disconnection, that human touch. What I've tended to find is that people are putting more value on the aspects of community that PMOs tend to do. So people are much more present at community events because they feel like they get to speak to their peers, they get to share information, experiences with their peers. So one of the things I would say is, if you don't have one, set up a community of practice within your organization so that it gives people the ability to learn, share and grow. But if you do have one, is make sure it doesn't go by the wayside. It's really easy, particularly when we're not sat next to each other, looking at each other and walking past people. It's very easy to forget about the community piece and forget about the importance of peer-to-peer interaction. So if you do have one, then make sure that you are continuing, maybe with reduced, it's summer after all, with some reduced activities, but make sure that you are using those activities and put in opportunities for people to learn. Like I said, technology is a really good example of something that people might need. And what you might find is, from a kind of post-pandemic perspective, what you might find is you'll get more people engaging. From a summertime perspective, what you might find is there might be less people, but you might get some of the people that tend to be in the background, that don't tend to get involved, might actually come to the fore. If there isn't lots and lots of people involved, they might actually just be able to take that slightly quieter space to start getting engaged and involved with PMOs. So don't let the community piece go to waste. It's really important, like I say, more important now, I think, than it's been in a really long time, is to actually talk to each other. So those are some high-level tactics. So do your project accounting, understand your reality, your environment right now. Do some lessons learned, understand what have we learned over the last 5 months. Most organizations had a digital strategy. That's been accelerated somewhat from 99% of them. So there's stuff that we can learn from that always. Then look at your objectives of the PMO. It's important for your PMO to stay true to what it does, but you also need to be able to adapt, especially in times like this. So look at your objectives and see if maybe we need to tweak, or we need to add something which might be really specific for now, for the reality of your organization now. And then refine the roadmap that you have, and then make sure that you are still focusing on that community piece. I read a report from, I think it was Forbes or McKinsey, and they kind of said that the amount of information that senior teams in particular are asking for is accelerating. So whereas before we might do kind of a big portfolio overview to look at planning, overall portfolio planning, maybe once a year, or in some organizations once every 6 months, that's actually being requested to be done on a monthly basis in lots of organizations, because organizations are protecting their cash flow. They want to know where their money's being spent, and they are much more open to defunding activities. So stuff like that is happening much more often. And the same with some of the monthly statistics that we would normally provide. Because of the remoteness, people are asking for that information on a much more frequent basis. So monthlies maybe in some organizations turn to weekly. So we are spending a lot of time collating data again, and making sure that we're giving people the right perspective, the right view, the right information and analysis. So it's important that we look at that whole piece of what our PMO does, what it did do, what it will likely do in the future, and just refine. And it might be, like I say, that reporting might just be for now. It might be for the next 6 months while we do get, back to normal, and we get people in the office, and then it might peter off. But the PMO, I believe, has a responsibility to be able to adapt to that scenario in whatever way it can, within reason, obviously. Okay, so the next one, the next thing we're going to talk about is a way to review your PMO. So there are 12 steps here, and there are little videos that kind of go with each one. But the first one for me is always do that reflective practice. We don't take enough time as PMOs or individuals to take a step back and really look at how we are doing. So I think now's a really good time for us to do that, and that's always something I always recommend when people want to change something, is just reflect and take a real critical eye almost on how is it that whichever way you look at it, performing right now? So reflect on the last 5 months. What services have been used in your PMO? Has your reporting been accelerated, or has that gone completely by the wayside? You know, have the community events stopped completely, or have we done more of them because people need more of that interaction? So really take a step back and reflect on the journey so far, and then identify some areas for opportunity. So like I say, community might be one for you if you don't do that already. Technology might be another one for you that your organizations had to suddenly adopt very quickly. And what we find is that organizations, what they've done is lots of different teams have downloaded lots of different software. So we need to make sure that we identify what is important, what is difficult, what is painful for our organizations right now. Then look at each of those and understand if and how it's going to add value. So we always tend to use kind of how much value versus how difficult is it to embed. But you know, if we did a drive on supporting people using the new technology better and running virtual meetings better and getting better outcomes from their online meetings, how much value will that add? And really kind of understand or assess all of the things, the different potential services that you identify, how much value is it really going to add? And one of the things I always say is everything is going to add value to somebody as a rule, but there are some things that are going to, you know, set the world on fire and everybody's going to be super happy with. And at the same time, there are some that are not probably going to set the world on fire, but they're going to add real value to a specific set of people. So understanding that balance of, if we put everything in, you know, super high value for everybody, then we may well be disappointed when it doesn't set the world on fire. So we do need to consider the value versus all of the other services that we're offering. Once you've identified that, what you'll get is almost a list with the most valuable stuff at the top and the least valuable at the bottom. And then what I always suggest that you do is you go down to the root. So why is this a problem right now? So rather than let's go into solution mode, we are human, so we tend to go into solution mode very, very quickly. One of the simple techniques that I like to use is the 5 whys analysis. So the concept being, if you ask why 5 times, and sometimes it'll be 4 and sometimes it'll be 7, you will eventually get to why that's a real problem. You'll get to the root cause of why that's painful right now. And once you know that, you can then start to really define what it is you need to do in order to fix or to support people with that particular issue. So get to the root of the problem. Don't just go, oh, well, it's obviously that, because a lot of the time it isn't. It really isn't. And it's something that it might appear on the surface to be a specific problem, but actually deep down it's something much bigger. And what you're looking at on the surface is just a symptom. So I do always recommend to get down to the root cause of the problem. Then you need to decide what kind of medicine each of that is. So again, you'll take your list of activities versus their value. You'll start to get a feel for the root cause and what that actually means you need to do. And then one of the concepts that we tend to use is the concept of painkillers and antibiotics, which I'm sure some of you have heard before. Some of our services, PMO, that we might develop and offer are like painkillers. So I have a headache, I take some paracetamol, and it kind of masks the problem until the situation resolves itself. And some of our services are exactly like that. Some of the stuff that we want to develop are about kind of putting something in place that is going to give us that immediate support, help to deal with that problem, whilst other stuff is happening in the background that will maybe just resolve itself. So like the technology is a really, really important thing at the moment. In 6 months, that might not be needed anymore. So for now, we might need to support people with it, and it might be something that doesn't need as much focus in the future. Other services and other things that we develop and release are like antibiotics. So if I take antibiotics, they take time to work. So there's usually a bit of a waiting period before they work. Some of our services are the same. We might put them in place, but they're going to take time before people start to really feel the difference in the culture or the way that they work. Important with antibiotics is quite often they come with side effects. So nausea, if you want to make lots of changes to the way your project managers and program managers and sponsors are working, there will be side effects. So you need to just be prepared for that. And the idea is once we understand, we go to the root cause, we know what it is that we need to do at a high level, then we need to decide if that's a painkiller or an antibiotic piece of work. And generally what we always recommend is that you kind of, when we talk about planning, you kind of scale those at different points so that you're not trying to do 3 big things at the same time or lots and lots of little things which can cause change fatigue. So like I said, I'm sure you've heard that before, and I'm hoping you can see this kind of building. Once you've done that, you know which ones are your high value, probably antibiotic services or things that you want to build. Then we need to create a profile, and this is a step that quite often doesn't happen, which I always find really interesting, because we encourage it for projects and programs to say, write your benefits profile. What does this actually mean? And we don't really tend to offer that or do that as PMOs. So one of the things I always say is to get it clear in your head, given that many people don't know what PMO do in many organizations, is actually create like a profile for each of your services or things that you want to develop. So, you know, what is it? Who are the key people to talk to? Because different things are being developed by other different people. What's the benefit profile for this particular activity? What is it going to bring to the organization? What's it going to bring to the people? You know, what metrics are you going to put in place? And if it's something brand new, a little roadmap, so you can people can actually see when we're planning to do this. And this really helps people to understand that you can't deliver everything tomorrow, that this is a journey, just like most of the work in PMO, just like projects. It's an ongoing journey that will develop over time. Then once you've got your profiles, you need to then think about your critical success factors and your critical success criteria. So factors, what do you need for this to be successful? So one of the things that we always tend to add to the profile is risk. What are the risks to this? Or if we switch it over, what are the factors that need to be in place in order for me to be able to develop and implement this successfully? So there will be some factors, whether, you know, it could be the right team, it could be the direction. We need to have the okay to be able to do that, but there will be some factors that will either help you or hinder you if you don't have them. So we always say then kind of preload or load your profiles with what is it that you need to have in place in order to be successful. Then we look at the maturity of each of those items. So quite a lot of the stuff you're going to want to do is not brand new. It already exists in your organization, albeit you might want to improve it, I would hope. Most things can be improved after all. So think about how mature that particular service, that particular item is at the moment. If it doesn't exist, then that's nice and easy. It's something that we're going to start from scratch. But there might be some things, like I say, that you want to improve that have maybe been around for some time. Now's a really good time to look at those. Are we doing this the way we've always done it because it's the way we've always done it? And this will help you to align your different aspects or activities that you want to do versus what's brand new, what's been around for a while, is it really, really mature? So in some cases that's actually quite hard to change, in which case that might then be turned into an antibiotic kind of service if we need to do lots of negotiation with other departments, etc. Next, we look at metrics. One of the big things that a lot of PMOs don't do is they don't measure their own performance. They measure the performance of the projects and programs and the portfolio, but they don't actually measure themselves. For me, it's really important that every service, everything that we are providing the business or our customers effectively, that we are able to say, this is how this particular thing is performing at the moment. So create some metrics. They don't all have to go down to a bottom line number. We always know that PMO is hard to measure because a lot of the time there isn't a bottom line impact, and that's one of the reasons why lots of PMOs have got rid of and have over the last few months, because they're seen as an overhead. And sometimes that's because they don't measure themselves, so they can't kind of prove that they're adding value. It's more of a gut feel as opposed to data. So one of the things, always look for how can we measure this and show that it's adding value, that we're delivering it to the right quality. Then once you've done all of that, you need to think about planning. So go back to that roadmap and make sure that you, like I said earlier, you don't have lots of antibiotics together, because that's lots of quite fast-paced change, which is going to potentially give people change fatigue. Don't forget, everybody's had a lot of change over the last few months already. But also don't have lots of antibiotics together. Antibiotics tend to take longer to work, so it might frustrate people if we're trying to change lots of big stuff on day one. So when you do your planning, schedule it in a logical way. You know your organization, you know the culture of change that you're living within, so make sure that you use that to your advantage. If you know that your organization is quite change averse, then don't put lots and lots of change all happening at the same time. Then once you start, what you'll find is that that's not the absolute answer. You will need to tweak this stuff. So your metrics are never once and done for me. It's, certainly when I build balanced scorecards, it takes 3 months to get the measures right. Just because once you start actually measuring, once you start developing, you do need to take a little bit of an agile mindset in that until we start, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So what we need to do is then continually refine, and then we go back and do maturity at a later stage. So usually a year, maybe 6 months, depending on how much change, but really understanding how have we matured in these services over that period of time. Have they actually made a difference, or have they not made a difference at all? So hopefully with this little cycle, you can actually see that each of the services, almost the process building up, so that you start off reflecting on what you do, then you identify some key areas, etc., and kind of helping you to add different additional information to each of those activities that you want to do, in order to then be able to see the journey. And journey, that word is really important. I've had lots of PMOs that say, oh, we need to set up a PMO and have it all up and running in 6 weeks. Well, that's lovely, and we can do that to a point, but is it going to be truly value adding, embedded into the organization? Probably not, because it takes time to change culture enough to make this and the way that we do the project management practice within our organization, it takes time to get that embedded and for everybody to be working in the same way. So it's really important that we are talking to our customers and telling them, making sure they know that this is a journey, it's managing their expectations. But hopefully at the moment, to get your PMO mojo back, this is a really good exercise to do, because what you'll find is that as you go through it, you'll become kind of more and more motivated to do it, because you can almost see it building as you go. So hopefully you can see that building up, and there are some little videos that I did that just go with alongside each of these, which you can see. So that's kind of one of the things that you can do that will hopefully help you to start to build that view of how you're performing and what the future might look like. And one of the things that I strongly recommend, we spoke to the APM about making this available to you. What I've done is developed MOT tool for the PMO. So it's completely free to download. You can have it in Spanish or in English. And what it is effectively an Excel spreadsheet, and it actually gives you a view on your current PMO performance. And you can see the grids that we've got, or the radar chart that we've got. It actually will show you some areas that are opportunity areas, so areas that you need to work on, and also some areas that you're really strong at the moment, which you should lever in order to be better at some of the other stuff. So it's, like I say, it's really good. It's personalizable, if that's a word. So you can add your own sections in if your PMO does something that maybe isn't, technically standard. There's no code, it's not fancy, but it will definitely help you to take that reflective practice and really take a critical look at how your PMO is performing. And again, once you do this and then you start to redefine what your services might look like, you'll find that your team, if you do this together, will get that PMO mojo back after this lockdown period. That they will be more motivated, and they've got something fresh, something new. It's a slightly different way of doing that kind of performance review as well as the MOT. So do feel free to go and download that. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me at any point. So that's kind of the PMO MOT. One of the things that I wanted to do, I'm conscious I've been talking for like 20 minutes, so we're going to do our second poll now. So our second poll, which is really based on what you've heard today, what do you think you could work on right now? Is it about understanding your reality, doing that portfolio accounting? Is it around lessons learned? Is that something that you could actually do with right now, do you think, to really understand what's gone well, what hasn't? Maybe your PMO objectives need to be reviewed, or the roadmap, or maybe it's the community element that actually we think we've maybe lost that a little bit by not being in the same space, and actually it's quite important. So we can see here that, so as this is all kind of happening, I can obviously see what's going on. And at the moment, roadmap is winning. So people needing to review their roadmap. I'm sure we all had some really great ideas of what we wanted to be able to do, but the reality of the situation right now is that we need to adapt that. And we are seeing that across lots of different PMOs. So that's always an interesting one. The next one, very close to that, is coming out as objectives. So again, looking at, before we had all this stuff that was important for us and our organisation. Now we've got lots of other stuff that's important that we didn't even consider before at all. So we need to maybe tweak our objectives slightly, even if it's temporarily, so that the business knows that we are there to support them, and we are going to adapt to help them through these difficult times. And then we've got community and lessons learned, kind of, which are neck and neck at the moment. So the importance of community, I can't stress that enough, really, as far as I'm concerned. That's one of the things that I've found with many of the clients that I work with. Some have said communication's gone much worse, it's much harder now, whereas other companies have said actually having the technology, and we actually communicate a lot better because we're chatting using the chat functions of different technology a lot more. We've got more meetings where people actually attend because they're not getting dragged off to do other things, because we are kind of in one space and usually at home. So they are pretty neck and neck. But not least is the portfolio accounting, which kind of hopefully means that you've kind of already taken a step back to really understand your reality, and what that means, what this whole weird year means for your organisation, the projects that you've had to maybe stop, some that you've continued, some have been accelerated, and really looking at what is the environment that we're in at the moment. So cool, okay. So before we finish, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about another webinar that we've got coming up. So on the 3rd of September, we've got John Burke. Some of you will remember him, hopefully, from doing a Love Your PMO series that we did last year. But on the 3rd of September, he's going to talk to us about delivering engagement and integration. It's another APM webinar, so we'd really love it if you would join us for that. In terms of the APM PMO SIG itself, we now have a new committee, which will be brought in officially as of September. So we hope to get lots of other webinars and other kinds of events and things with the new committee following our planning session later on this month. So any questions? The statistics, they come from wrike.es, WRIKE.es, that I used right at the beginning. There are lots of different statistics and reports that are coming out from lots of different organisations. So McKinsey has some really great insights, Forbes as well, into how this particular time and the concept of home working has really changed the way that the organisations and people tend to work. So one of the key questions that's just popped up from Joy, could you give some examples on how metrics are used and what sort of metrics? So every PMO is different, Joy, so it's hard for me to decide, but there are some key elements that I tend to use with people that I work, PMOs that I work with, and I always tend to use like a balanced scorecard approach, which, if you don't know, a balanced scorecard has 4 sections in it. Why do I use that? Largely because although there could be lots and lots of measures that sit underneath, we don't want to give massive spreadsheets of data to the senior team, because quite often they won't read it, they don't necessarily understand it either. And with a balanced scorecard, you can just show them the 4 main metrics, and the information's there if they want to dig in. So in terms of metrics into those 4 sections, there are some metrics which are value to the business, and they will only be available depending on what your PMO does. So in some organizations, they can be anything from, you know, how many of our projects are stopped before they get in, so pipeline and stuff like that. How many as well of our PMOs are working to strategic alignment of projects. So are they working in that demand, in that piece of work? Then we've got some which will be around project management and portfolio management and delivery and the metrics around that. But one of the really important ones is around the PMO. And what I would always suggest is that depending on your services, that you have a specific set of metrics to show whether you're doing that. So for example, if one of the metrics is around engagement and community events, we might say we need to have 4 events set up on a monthly basis. That's a great metric, but it doesn't really tell us anything. So we need to add to it. We need to aggregate information for people. So we might say, well, how many people registered for those events? And then we might find out how many people didn't show up and why not. And those 4 together start to tell us a little bit of a story. So it's important that we look at the service that's in your service catalogue and define how can you measure it. If you can't measure it, then it's really hard for us to improve on anything. Like I say, we're back to that gut feel. But yeah, if you need any more information, like I say, every PMO is different, then you can just get in touch with PMO SIG and we'll obviously share with you what we can. Next question, where would we recommend we start if the PMO is new to the business? So I always say start with why. Have we written a business case? Do we understand why the PMO is designed for PMO to exist in the first place? So it's really important that we start there, that we understand why our stakeholders, our customers are asking for it. So once we do that, we can start to really understand what our objectives are likely to look like, what our scope is likely to look like, what our remit is likely to look like. And then once you do that, then use that 12-step process to really understand what's what. We've mentioned the balanced scorecard. Is it similar to BSC? Yeah, it's exactly the same. So BSC is balanced scorecard. It's been around for some time, but I've always found that it does allow PMOs to be able to say, this is a people section, maybe a value to business section, a delivery section, and then a PMO performance section. And it's just, I've always found it a really nice way to split everything up so that the senior teams, don't need to be educated every single time that we want them to make a decision, but also it allows us to aggregate the information to a high enough level that, like I say, they can make informed decisions. And if they want the detail, it's there in the background. How to extract information from the business units beyond questionnaires is a really good question. So the way I've always seen it, a PMO or a service provider, so we have a bunch of customers. So to get information from the business units, if we're asking them to do something in addition to their role, in addition to something, they need to understand the why. So let them see the bigger picture. Most reasonable human adults are not going to kick you out of the room if you explain, yes, I'm asking you to do something extra, but this is the why. This is what we're trying to achieve in the wider context. Like I say, most reasonable human adults aren't going to then kick you out of the room, as long as you don't make it a really cumbersome process. So that would be my next thing, is whatever you use, make it simple, make it engaging, maybe think outside the box a little bit, make it slightly different to the corporate grey or whatever colour you have. That is always a really good way of capturing people's imagination. So hopefully that helps Ashok a little bit. Could we share some balanced scorecards? So we've got a fairly standard one. Yeah, I mean, if you search for balanced scorecard, you'll be able to see lots on Google, but what we can do again is we'll put some stuff onto the microsite after this webinar so that you can see what a balanced scorecard can look like. But like I say, what you will realistically see is kind of 4 blocks of information with colours in them usually. But yeah, I'm sure we can share something that is just off Google or some of the stuff that we've got in the background. How do we engage people in risk management? Wow, that's left field. Well, Katie, it depends on. Risk management is a really important topic for me, for project management as a whole. It's one of our key kind of pillars of how we do projects, how we deliver successful projects. So again, people need to understand the why. Also, you need to understand the audience that you want. So one of the things I always say about risks and lessons is make it part of the day job. So don't wait until you've got your monthly meeting to go, hi, have we got any new risks? or any new lessons, same kind of thing. What we need to do is make it part of the day job. So one of the things one of my PMOs does is they actually have in all of their weekly meetings, in their standard agenda, they have risks and they have lessons. And that allows people to think about it as they go through the life of the project, as opposed to think about it at the end or usually when something bad has happened. So get them to understand the why, get the right audience, and make it part of the day job are kind of the three things that I would say around risk management. So I think we've answered all of the questions. So what I would like to say is thank you for joining this webinar. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. I hope you found it insightful in terms of trying to maybe think about a new consideration of how you can make your PMO stronger for the future. Thank you, everybody.